Hello everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. Today's webinar is a little bit different from our normal training sessions if you've joined those before. And if you haven't, for a bit of background, every Wednesday we run a full training session in Shorthand where we go through all of the different features and section types within that. It's quite comprehensive and it lasts about an hour and a half. But because we kind of go over everything, there's often a couple of questions that we get about other elements in Shorthand where it might be kind of useful to go into in a bit more detail, delve a little bit further into those and provide a bit more context, information and examples. So over the coming months, we're adding a number of kind of special type webinars where we will take some of the kind of questions, some of the issues that often come up on Shorthand that we get asked about, and basically do a special kind of half an hour webinar delving into these subjects. And this is the first one today. So the first one is on promotion techniques in Shorthand. And then next month, actually, if you are interested, we do have one on making the most of the reveal section, which of course is a section type within Shorthand. So, and just for a little bit of background, I'm Dawn, I'm Training and Support Manager at Shorthand. So I run all of the training sessions and all of these webinars as well. There is a Q&A function within this Zoom chat as well. So if you think of any questions that you want to ask, then do post them. What I'll do is I will leave all of the questions until the end of the session and then just cover those off. The other thing I should mention is that this story that I'm going to be presenting is, of course, created within Shorthand itself. So what I'm going to be doing is actually toggling between the kind of draft of this story and then this preview of this story just to talk you through some of the elements here. Also, I'm actually going to publish this story afterwards and send it around to everyone so it can act as a bit of a recap. It's only half an hour, so I can only kind of delve into, as much information as I can during this time. So there are some good kind of reading follow-ups within here that you can click on and have a look back. And of course, if you wanted to go back to any of the story examples I've shown as well, then that could be useful as well. So the things that we're going to cover off and kind of the motivation for doing this as the first kind of special webinar is we see so much work put into putting these amazing digital engaging stories together. But then actually often what we see a lot of people falling down or unfortunately neglecting, either because they've run out of time or they've just not thought about it, or maybe they're not aware of the different ways that they could tackle this, is actually thinking about how audiences are going to discover these stories. What does that discovery journey look like for your audience and how are they going to actually find these stories? So today we'll be covering the following. Firstly, SEO, a little bit of a starting guide and also where you can seek more information on that. The social sharing buttons and how to use those. Publishing and the Shorthand embeds. Collection sections and landing pages, and then some additional thoughts and tips really on promotion. And then I'll cover questions off at the end. So firstly, SEO, a bit of a starting guide. Now, we're not claiming to have all of the answers when it comes to SEO. Many people say it's a bit of a dark art, and of course search engines like Google are often always changing the algorithms that they work with. But what we've put together, and this is just a snippet really from a support document that you can read afterwards, is just some kind of best practice tips and some of the things that you should be thinking about. So the first thing to think about is whether or not your site is being indexed by search engines. Now, if you're publishing your Shorthand stories to your own website, i.e. if you have a Prime X or a Pro X account, then you probably already know if your site is being indexed. And if you don't, I would certainly recommend looking that up. Now, I've put actually an example of a Shorthand story subdomain here. So this is the kind of domain that you would have if you opt to publish via Shorthand servers. So firstly, just determine whether or not your site is being indexed. You just need to search for that. Of course, search engines do crawl billions of pages. So if your site is not on Google, it may be for one of the following reasons. So it might be because that site isn't well connected from other sites on the web. For example, you may have no backlinks, or you may have no links from your main site. And that's something else that I'll cover today as well, in terms of how to link from your main site. You may have just launched the site and Google has not had time to crawl it yet. This is especially relevant, of course, if you choose Shorthand hosting, then this subdomain would have just been made for you. The design of the site may make it difficult for it to be crawled. Maybe rather than having kind of good H1s in the story, i.e. having good headlines, which I'll cover in a second, that are in the first text box, you've actually decided to have all of your text embedded in video or actually embedded in images. It's fine to have text in videos or in images, but you do need to think about putting that images in alternative text or in other ways so that search engines can crawl it. Other reasons, Google received an error trying to crawl it. You can use Google's console and other search engine consoles to basically find out why that might be. Or you might have a policy that blocks the site from being crawled. Moving on, you also need to accurately describe your page's content. And this is really where Shorthand comes in, and kind of the things that you need to think about when you're putting this story together right at the beginning. Thinking about the promotion of your story does start when you're actually putting this story together. It's not something that should be waited and thought about at the end of the process. So firstly, you need to describe your story through the title. And I'm just going to flip to my Shorthand story here in its kind of raw form in the editor. Your title will appear in the settings. So this is where the title is. You will have noticed as well that the title actually comes directly from the title in the first text box in the title section, but you can actually override it in the settings here as well. So you kind of get two choices there. I would say it's best practice to keep these titles the same, but the most important one is the one that is going to appear here. This is actually what will display in search engines and also social media, whereas this one that's going to be seen kind of to the visible eye, but also will class as your H1 on the page as well. So with that title, what do you need to think about? Well, you need to choose a brief descriptive page title that really communicates the story that you're telling. You need to align that title with what you want to rank for in search. So again, this is thinking about that discovery journey. How are your audience going to find it? What are they going to be looking for on the web? And how are they actually going to find that story? What would they be looking for if they want to find your story or your page? Don't choose a vague or complex title or leave it untitled. Now, something that we would sort of recommend is a lot of people start Shorthand stories either from scratch, or they might use one of our templates that you have. So if I just go into the dashboard here and then go to create a new story, you can actually pick a number one of these templates. Now, these templates all have a name to begin with, so you need to make sure that you're overriding that name, that you're giving it a title. You don't want to leave that, floating princess is the name of one of them, for example. That's not really going to make people find your story. Don't make titles unnecessarily long, and make sure the story title appears as crawlable text, i.e. that is in your title section and your H1. So that's why I said you can have these as different titles, but it's really good practice to have this being the same as that in the title. And if you just put your title in here first, it will carry across immediately to the settings. The other thing that is also just mentioning about the video as well, video and text, text in video and in images as well. So you want to make sure that the text is crawlable and that it's actually in that first H1. Next is description. So description, you probably saw it already when I opened up this panel, but it's just here. Now this is a good example of description and how you can make it differ. Now, obviously I'm using this story today as a bit of more of a presentation technique really for you with the webinar. So I've just put my details on here so you can email me and know who I am. But with the settings, I've actually just put in a little description about what my story is actually about. So that's where you can kind of have those differing as well. And of course, this description is going to be the most important there. So what should your description say? You want to write a description that informs and interests readers. Again, why should they read your story? There's so much content out there on the web. What makes your story different? Why should they spend their time reading it? Align the description with key search terms you want to rank for. Again, same with the title. Don't write a description that bears no relevance to your content. Now, this sounds really obvious, but you would be surprised about some of the descriptions and titles that you see out there. Don't just list keywords. You can list keywords in the keywords box here, but you need to make the effort to write a good title and a good description there. Avoid using the same description for multiple stories as well. You may have projects that are quite similar, but try to differentiate them. Again, think about how, when people discover these on the web, what's going to make those different. Now, that's all I'm going to do on SEO today, but there is more information on our support document, so I will send this story around afterwards. Next up is social sharing buttons. So the social sharing buttons are a fantastic way of encouraging your audience to share your story with their own audiences, basically, for that kind of further exposure. And where are the social sharing buttons? Well, they're just up here in the top right-hand corner. You'll see that I've actually activated both Twitter and Facebook already on this story. And this is what we offer as standards. So we have Facebook and Twitter as standards. So I'm just going to show you how to use these. So you need to first come into the story, and then to basically access those social sharing buttons, you just need to click on the buttons themselves, or you just need to click on social here. Now, I've actually already added in my final publish URL into here, so that has automatically copied across to my social sharing button, so that's in there for me as well. If I actually take this away and then just click out of there, you notice that this hasn't been activated. So you do need to know your final published URL before you use these. Next up, you need to decide whether you're going to use Facebook or Twitter, or one or the other, or both. I'm going to use both in this option. And then for Facebook, you need to think of a title and a description that you want here. So I've actually just written some already, which I'm just going to post in here to show you. So this is going to be my title, which is actually just the same as my H1. And then I'm going to add my description. Again, this is really similar to my description that I want there. And then what I'm going to do for Twitter is something a little bit different. Again, very simple. I've just put learn best practice advice, and I've just put some key hashtags in there that I would want to be picked up when my audience decide to share this. So that's already in there. And then lastly, I've just put in my Twitter handle as well, so that it's going to be shared via the Shorthand Twitter page. You can also add a short URL. This is optional. So something like bit.ly or tiny URL will give you further analytics and kind of indication of how that's being shared, and can be very useful. So would also recommend using that if you wanted to. The other thing you need to think about is whether or not you want to show the icons on mobile. On mobile, of course, you have less space. So if I put them on for now and just click out of here, so that saves, and then just go to the simulator, you'll see that I've got my burger navigation here for mobile, whereas of course on desktop it's across the header. And then I've got my social sharing buttons here that appear to the left-hand side of that. But I can decide to have those off if I think that's a little bit too overcrowded here. Our kind of stance on it is to say that you don't necessarily need to have them on a mobile. Most mobile phones have their own sharing mechanisms built in, and they can go directly into their own social media. Of course, the only downside of not using that is, of course, then you're putting in all of this great information that you want to be shared in a particular way, and then your audience are not going to do that. So that's just a kind of a judgment call that you need to make there. A really top tip on this, and this is something that a lot of people get caught out by. If the information is showing incorrectly when it's shared on social media, so either if it's you actually doing it and you're taking this final publishing URL once it's all been published and then sharing it on social media, and it's maybe the image is not coming up, maybe it's coming up blank, maybe the information is wrong, maybe it says page not found, it's not getting that nice kind of share tile. Or if you find you're actually clicking on these icons and again, none of the right information is coming through, more often than not, 9.99 times out of 10, it's usually to do with the fact that Facebook and Twitter cache the information. So if I show you the Facebook debugger, for example, which is here, you can enter in the URL. Now, I'm just going to show you with this preview URL, which is obviously not my final published URL, but this is just for kind of purposes to show you how it works. Is if you put in this URL, you can debug it, and it basically shows you what's happening with this. So it's telling me that the image is not being specified, basically. And that's because it's not my proper published URL, i.e. I've put in preview, but this is where it's saying it's going to go, but it's not yet there yet, so it can't get that information. However, it is just picking up this link here, so I can see how that's going to look. But I can see that this and this do not add up, so that's why it's telling me that there's a warning there. And Twitter has a Twitter card validator as well. So Twitter card validator, it's just here, and again you can put in a URL into here, and it will just show you. I'll actually show you what this looks like with just shorthand.com. I'll show you with the preview actually. And there you go. You can see it's not working properly because again, the link that I'm putting in doesn't match up with the link in here. So that's the reason why it's not working. The other thing that you may see is you can actually, with the debugger, the Twitter card validator gives it a push on caching straight away. But with this, with the Facebook one, you can scrape again. So say you changed, so say I went back into the story, I corrected this to the preview link, for example, went back into here, press scrape again, and it would scrape that information. And then that would sort out the issues. So as mentioned, at the moment we offer Twitter and Facebook as the standard, but we can quote for custom work to add other buttons as well if you wanted to explore that. So just for a couple of examples, you can add other buttons like these here, and you can also add other buttons like he's here, so we can offer some custom work on that. Or I would recommend actually checking out a third-party tool like Share This. This is really good where you can add these different buttons here, and these will just go into a custom HTML section or a custom HTML block. And then this story has a nice example actually where you can share a specific stat so readers would share it with their audience. That's a really good way. So that's everything on the social buttons for now, and there's more information here that you can pick up afterwards, and I'll move on to publishing and shorthand embeds now. So firstly, you need to decide how you're going to publish your stories, and this will be really dependent on what subscription plan you sign up for. So there's just a little bit of a breakdown here. So typically with Prelude, Prime and Pro, you're going to be putting your stories onto shorthand servers, and you'll either have something like yourcompany.shorthandstories or a master subdomain of your own. So maybe stories.yourcompany.com, for example. With Prime X and Pro X, they're going to be hosted on your own servers. So you're going to publish to your own domain or subdomain, using something like our zip exports, which is the kind of the most basic option, or one-click hosting via an Amazon S3 server or SFTP, or maybe using one of our plugins for Drupal and WordPress. Also with ProX, there's just a note there that is discounted on multi-domain publishing. So you may be publishing to more than one domain. Now, I won't go too much into the plans. I really want to focus on the different ways of actually promoting the stories from your home pages, or whether or not you're actually going to create a landing page within Shorthand itself. So firstly, you need to consider where and how your audience are going to find the story on your website. So if you're using a dual approach, if you already have a CMS and Shorthand is, kind of an add-on to that for your, your visual stories, you need to think about how you are going to present those on your current homepage. And these are quite good examples of how to do that using the own CMS. So obviously we in Shorthand, we've not really had anything to do with the way that this has actually been crafted together. So this is the CMS that the University of Cambridge already have. But what they've done is they've actually built Shorthand into the kind of infrastructure of how that works. So they have this carousel of stories that runs through, and of course this links to all of the different kind of stories that they have in their traditional CMS. And many of these actually link through to Shorthand stories. So the first one I've picked is actually a YouTube. Let's pick the next one. So that one's a YouTube, and then this one is a Shorthand story. So that's a good example of how you can kind of have that dual approach on your homepage. Second example I want to show is this example by Tom's. So just minimize that. And then they've got this link that they've created. Again, that's nothing to do with Shorthand in terms of how they've actually put this onto their own CMS. But they've crafted this themselves. And then this actually goes through to a masked subdomain. So this is actually on Shorthand servers. And this is all a Shorthand story. So you'll notice they have quite a customized theme here. And then this itself is a collection section, which I'll talk about in more detail. So that's one way of doing it, and that's a good way of doing it if you kind of already have a bit of an idea of how you're going to integrate it with your own CMS system. If you need help with that type of linking, though, we can offer one of our story launcher embed or our beta embed options. So the story launcher will give you a clickable tile that you can use in the Shorthand story, which is available just with this drop down here. So just in the publish up here. And then you do, again, need to know the final published URL where it's going to appear. And then it gives you this tile that you can then embed into your own CMS system. And there's some good examples of this, such as this story by the FT. So they have this kind of landing page, the CMS landing page for this story with some key points. And then you open up the story, you kind of go into that interactive experience, and then you can close that again. Another example of that here as well. The other option is the Shorthand embed, which gives you the option to actually embed the whole story into a full width page into your CMS system. So you publish this to a Shorthand stories domain, or you do it to your own domain, and then actually what you do is you pull through the whole story into your normal kind of CMS system. So this is what Sky have done. This is a normal full width page in their CMS, and then you'll see behind the header, below the header, everything is the Shorthand story. So then the Shorthand story loads underneath that. And the same again with this. Again, that's all I'll go through on these, but there's more information on this link here. Next up is the collection sections and landing pages. And the collection sections are a section type within Shorthand that enables you to build out a collection of stories or web pages that your audience can navigate to. So these can be two different things. You can either have a collection section on perhaps the bottom of your story that links your readers through to other web pages or other stories. So again, once they finish one story, they're going through to something else that's promoting that and giving them kind of further exposure. Or you can create a homepage or a landing pages. So here are some example of the collection sections. I'll go actually on to the Honda Engine Room one first. So this is actually a site that is purely created with just Shorthand only, actually. So there's no other CMS system in sight. So what they've done is they've actually built a site nav with just the collection sections here. So this is a Shorthand story. They have quite a custom header here. They have a title section, and then it goes immediately into the collection section there. We've also done something similar with the craft, and of course there was that Tom stories as well. That's it for collection sections for now. There's much more information though on how to actually put a collection section together on this link, and there's also some more insight into creating landing pages here. To finish off, and before I leave some time for questions, there's just some additional tips I want you to get you thinking about. So firstly, will you use deep linking to promote certain parts of the story, and have you created a story navigation? So deep links are a really great way to actually promote different parts of your story. So perhaps if I wanted to promote this story in kind of a serialization format, maybe SEO on week 1, social buttons on week 2, then I could do that, because each of these sections have their own link. Social channels. I would encourage you to think where, why, and how, and think about what that will look like. For example, will you just use the standard card as below, which we saw gets just automatically populated through the link? Or will you do something special like Honda have done? So will you have maybe a video or like a moving GIF or something like that to kind of tempt the audience to click on it? Next, have you considered reposting again after your initial push, perhaps on sites like Reddit? A lot of people say that their shorthand stories are often evergreen content and they should be promoting them again and again. So one customer told us, for example, just to say, I shared the shorthand piece on Reddit again this week and it went viral on our website. We had 40,000 views of it in just two days, and then they only had 31K up until then. So just by reposting that on Reddit, it increased their audience by a lot. So a really good way of thinking about how you can promote on different social channels once you've done your main kind of strategy as well. Finally, will you promote your story in e-newsletters or on any print material that you're already physically sending out? And are there any sites that you can contact that will promote your story that will help with the backlinking issue that we touched on at the beginning as well when we were looking at SEO? So that's it for now. Thank you so much for listening to that. I hope that's been a useful kind of little delve into promotion techniques within shorthand. Sorry for overrunning slightly. I will stick around for another 10 minutes though, and just answer any questions that you may have on what I've been talking about today. If you do have to rush off, thank you ever so much again for listening, and have a good day.